Good morning, everyone. I see folks are joining. So we are a little early. We will give it a few more minutes for folks to join. And while our board members are joining, you will notice that you're going to be promoted to panelist and renamed so that we can identify you as a board member. So please click on that panelist invitation link and then rejoin so we can see you. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first Cradle-to-Career Data System Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. I see that folks are still joining. I know it's 9:30, but we want to give enough time for our board members to get online and get settled. So we'll give it a couple more minutes to just sit in awkward Zoom silence for a moment while our board members join. So we appreciate your patience. Thank you. Hi again, everyone. We are just giving it a few more moments for our board members to join, and then we'll get started. So we appreciate your patience. Thank you. And to our board members, if you are in the kind of like attendees section, you will see something pop up that says we're inviting you to be a panelist. So you'll have to exit and rejoin as a panelist. So please make sure you accept that link so you'll be able to unmute and share your video and things like that throughout today's meeting. So if you see that, just go ahead and accept it. Okay, so it looks like we have most of our board members here. So we can go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to the inaugural Cradle-to-Career Data System Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. We're so excited to kick off our Data and Tools Advisory Board today. My name is Sydney Armendariz. I am the Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships here at C2C. Most of y'all have probably seen me in your inbox over these last few months, but I'm excited to welcome you all and to kick off this wonderful work. So I'll just go through the agenda just to give you all a heads up on what's coming. So today we will have our swearing in ceremony. The Government Operations Agency Secretary, Amy Tong, will administer the oath to you. Then we will give time for all of our board members to introduce themselves and share your full name, your title, your background. And then you will have an opportunity to meet the C2C team. So you'll have an opportunity to meet Marianne and the rest of the executive team. And then we'll go into an overview of the data system and the advisory boards and give you information on how your role as an advisory board will help fuel this work that we're going to do to implement and maintain this data system. Then we will open it up for public comment, and that gives the public a chance to submit either written or verbal comment to the board. So we'll leave time for that. And then we will end with a team building opportunity, which is really your chance as board members to share your excitement about the system. At least we hope you're excited. It's an opportunity for you to share any concerns that you have about this implementation process, and also any opportunities that you see coming for our work as the Office of C2C and for the data system, and any opportunities for you all as board members. So we'll give some time for that at the end. And then of course, throughout the day, we'll have opportunities for questions and conversation and dialogue about the C2C system. So I am just double checking really quickly to see if our secretary, if Secretary Tong is on. Let's see, I don't see her just yet. One moment. Okay, so while we are waiting for Secretary Tong to go ahead and administer the oaths, I think we can maybe move forward with getting into some introductions of the team. But let me just keep double checking. My apologies. It's really hard to facilitate and also look at this changing participant list at the same time. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, thanks so much, Sydney. Would you like me to talk about introductions for a little bit while you are able to check on that portion of it? Okay.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm happy to see all of you here today. I'm thrilled to be that today is the day we're launching officially this Data and Tools Advisory Board, and just wanted to thank all of you for the time that you're investing in this. You're all incredibly busy with many responsibilities and doing important work in the many other aspects of your professional lives. And we're incredibly grateful that you will be giving the governing board recommendations and ensuring that the work we're doing is as strong as it possibly can be. So while we're waiting to officially start, I can introduce myself. I've already met many of you. Excited to meet the rest of you today and work with you in the coming months. So my name is Marianne Bates. I'm the Executive Director of the Cradle-to-Career Data System. Began in this role in February of this past year, so we're about 6 months in, and I'm just incredibly honored and excited to build this work together with you. Prior to coming to Cradle-to-Career, I was working at the national level and from the nonprofit and research side, and working in evidence-based policy and program evaluation, and working to link large administrative data sets to learn about the impact of specific programs. So that background is part of why I was incredibly excited to join this work in California because I've seen the power of what we can learn from data, and am excited to be able to build a system that we hope can create a sea change in what's possible for us to learn, and creating tools and resources that are really useful for students and families. So that's who I am. Next, I'd love to introduce my colleague, Ryan, who can introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Super happy to meet everybody. My name is Ryan Estriato, and I'm the Director of Data Programs at Cradle-to-Career. And before that, I was at the San Diego County Office of Education, and I've worked in public education for my whole career up until now, as a school psychologist and also as an administrator in different parts of the system. So I've worked with data from the individual level as a school psychologist, and then all the way up into much larger data sets at the county level and state level. And from that experience, I've learned that I really enjoy working with data from a couple of different angles, both from the analytic and data science side of things, but also in how we communicate what we learn from data to a larger audience. And so I'll be leading the user-centered design process for our data products. And one project that I wanted to highlight in particular is our user-centered design process for the teacher retention and training dashboard. And that's a process where we'll be learning how families and researchers and planners use data, and then also taking what we've learned to evolve the products that we develop together. And so I'm very much looking forward to inviting y'all to participate in that process with us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Next, we'll have my colleague, Dan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Lamery. I'm the Director of Data Infrastructure here at C2C. A quick background, I've been working in education for 15 years and served on 2 of the planning subcommittees for Cradle-to-Career. More recently, I was the Senior Director of Information Technology, overseeing the intersegmental data system that is CalPAS Plus, for those of you that are aware of that project. And I was the data architect for the multiple measures assessment project, which led to AB 705. I'm so excited to be working with this awesome team at C2C and building what we've all been talking about for the last 15 years, or as long as I've been in education. So this is really thrilling for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next, my colleague, Shannon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shannon Serrato. I'm the Director of Engagement here with Cradle-to-Career. And prior to this, I was Communications Director and many other communications roles with the Institute for College Access and Success, a higher education policy and research organization based in California, Michigan, and nationally. And there, I really learned about the power of data and comms for good. And that really drove my wanting to be a part of Cradle-to-Career. And my background, I am from National City, California, San Diego, South Bay. And it's one of those places where a lot of kids don't really have the tools and the information they need to succeed. A lot of kids get written off. And luckily I was able to navigate the system, but I want to make sure that people like me, it's easier for us to come up. And so that's why I'm really driven to the work. And I'm just so excited to be able to build a system with everyone that will really serve all Californians. And so as Director of Engagement, I'll be leading all of the branding and all the things that come with building a new system. So you'll be hearing from me about everything from naming, websites, logos, all of those things. But what I'm really excited about is engaging the community, asking them what they need, making sure that we're asking the right questions. And if we're not, making sure that we're listening and listening often about what folks really need to succeed. So that's what I'll be doing here. And I'm excited to be working with you all today. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Next up, we have Sydney.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Sydney Armendariz. I'm the Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships. I've been with C2C for almost a year. It'll be a year in November. And most of my background actually has to do with healthcare administration and public health. I worked a lot for Medi-Cal. I worked for the Department of Public Health. And I also have a little bit of workforce background. I managed the Prison to Employment Grant Initiative a couple years ago. So most of my background has been in healthcare and social services. So fairly new to the educational sector, but learning a lot, not only from you all in our conversations, but just in general, learning about how all the education partners work together. And I'm really excited to be a part of this work because I think this is just an opportunity for good government. I think it's important to make sure that government works for its people. And I think access to data to everyone, for everyone to have access to data is super, super important to make data-driven decisions. So really excited to be a part of this work and to get to know all of you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sydney. Maybe what we can do next, we would like to ask each of you who are advisory board members to introduce yourselves. And what we would like to ask you to do is to share your name, your title, your organization, and what brought you to this work. And perhaps if I can request, Rajil, if you could put these 4 bullet points in the chat, then we can stop sharing and see each other's faces while we're all getting to know you and you do your introductions. I will go through your names in alphabetical order by last name. And if you could, after I say your name, if you could just introduce yourself again, name, title, organization, and what really brought you to this work. Why are you excited about it? So with that, we'll start with Alex Adams.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I'm at a hotel, so I wasn't sure how the Wi-Fi was going to be. So great. And the joys of having a double A name, I'm always first pretty much, unless we go backwards. So my name is Alex Adams. I'm the Senior Director of Institutional Research, Planning and Effectiveness at Fresno City College. And what brought me to this work is I've been with our district for about 8 years, and throughout, I've been working on with our partners at the county, K-12s, with the Cal States and UCs, and really banging our heads against the wall, trying to share data and make sure that, you know, what we're doing is effective. And so we always seem to have these larger than a county sort of issues that we run into. So I've been following this project from for a couple of years, really, as you were developing what this was going to be, watching the different webinars. So I was thrilled to be selected to be on this advisory board. So glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Marshall Anthony Jr.
Good afternoon, East Coast time. Good morning, West Coast time. I'm Marshall Anthony Jr., Research Director at the Institute for College Access and Success, also known as TCAS. I lead the research agenda that focuses on ambitiously advancing and radically reimagining a higher ed system that equitably benefits students from all walks of life, and we focus on projects related to race and college opportunity, race and equitable resources, and race and economic mobility as well. And TCAS at large works to advance affordability, accountability, and equity in higher ed as well. So glad to meet all of you and look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Jason Borgen.
Hi, good morning. Jason Borgen, Chief Technology and Innovations Officer for Santa Cruz County Office of Education. Former middle school teacher, curriculum director, and now kind of working on all technology initiatives, both from the innovation side as well as the infrastructure side. So really happy to support both the students, teachers, administrators, and the IT side in K-12 supporting data. I also chair our Santa Cruz local data share committee focused on bringing multiple community-based organizations together to look at data and build data literacy mindset. So really focusing on how do we create a systemic view on using data to drive decisions. So very happy to be here and excited to be working with all of you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Lisa Chavez.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Chavez, and I'm the Director of Research at the State Bar of California. The State Bar of California is the attorney regulation agency in the state of California. How did I, a lifelong person passionate about education who spent 20 years in education, end up studying attorneys? An opportunity presented itself, and I was interested in a leadership role, and here I am. That said, I've been in this role for 3 years, and I still have not lost my passion for education. and data in particular. So I was excited when this opportunity arose, and I'm thrilled to join this amazing group. What brought me in particular to the Data and Tools Advisory Board is I just discovered my passion as an undergrad, and it just never left. And I'm passionate about data, and I'm passionate about tools, and I'm a storyteller by nature. And that's what really is just thrilling to me, is to be able to advise this team on how to just really leverage this amazing data set that is being built, data tool that's being built. And so I look forward to working with you all.
Great, thank you so much. Next up, Tamika Connor.
Hello, I'm Tamika Connor. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Calbright College, which is our newest online California community college focused on adult learners and short-term certifications that will lead to higher paying jobs, more secure jobs, and hopefully benefits for our adult learners throughout the state of California. I am also on the core team for strategic enrollment management for the California Community College's State Chancellor's Office. All of our work with our sister colleges and districts have to do with data. In my former role, I was Assistant Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management at the Peralta Community College District, and a former department chair and faculty member in ethnic studies. All of my roles have been focused as well on dual enrollment and helping to improve outcomes for our most marginalized populations. And so my work has been focused on retention, persistence, and completion rates, and enrollment management covers everything. I am also the accreditation liaison for our institution, and institutional effectiveness and data is part of my role as well at my institution. And of course, we have been focused on Launch Board and the student success metrics, and really ways in which we can visualize data, particularly bringing it to the level of faculty and the end users so that they could use that data in real time to make more well-informed decisions on how we're serving our students and our communities. And so I am super excited about this work. I hope to bring some real information from our end user stakeholders of what would be helpful in making decisions that will move the metrics and move the mark on our equity agendas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'm happy to let you know that Secretary Tong has joined us. So we're going to switch gears now and do the official swearing in ceremony. So as you know, the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data is a brand new state entity, and we are housed within the Government Operations Agency. And the GovOps team has been wonderful and supportive over the past year as we work to set up a new office, and being there for us and helping us navigate all of the different state processes and systems. So we're honored to have the GovOps Secretary, Amy Tong, with us this morning, and she will now swear in the members of the Data and Tools Advisory Board. So over to Secretary Tong.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My apology for being tardy this morning, and we are literally in the midst of moving our office to a brand new location. So we're doing a little bit of unpacking as we speak, but I'm thrilled to be here and really to join Marianne to welcome you all and congratulate you all to be appointed to this advisory board. I'm going to go through the swearing oath of office with you all. The drill will be that each one of you will require to raise your right hand and repeat after me. So please do unmute yourself. With the exception of your name, you know, everybody can say follow the script. When they get to the part that you get to say your name, I will prompt you to do so. So if you are ready, please go ahead and unmute yourself and raise your right hand. And please repeat after me. I
I
Heather Huff.
Jada So.
Alex.
Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly
Swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
defend
the Constitution of the United States
the
the
Constitution
Constitution of the United
States
and the constitutions of the state of California
and the
and the
Constitution
of the State of California
against all enemies,
against
all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will
bear
true faith and allegiance
allegiance
the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of California,
and the
Constitution
of the State of
California.
that I take this obligation freely
That
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental
reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or
purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will
well
and faithfully
discharge the duties which I am about to enter.
discharge
the
duties
upon which I am
I am
about to
about to enter.
enter.
Congratulations, board members, and welcome again. Back to
Thank
you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Secretary Tong, and congratulations to our Data and Tools Advisory Board members. I always get a little bit emotional when a swearing-in ceremony happens because the words in that oath really reflect why we're here, right? And why all of you are dedicating your time to this board. We're here to serve the people of California. So thank you, Secretary Tong, for doing that. And now you're all officially on our advisory board. So congratulations. With that, I think we can return to our introductions. We'll pick up right where we left off. And I think the next person in alphabetical order is Reagan Faust.
Hi, everyone. Reagan Faust, Executive Director of the Children's Data Network at the University of Southern California. The Children's Data Network is a data and research collaborative focusing on the linkage and analysis of administrative records, which obviously has inspired my work and my decision to apply, and also excitement about being included. So thank you for that. For the past 6 years, so I've been working in partnership with public and private entities in order to integrate and analyze administrative records, both to understand outcomes for children in California in a way that's very rigorous, efficient, and population-based, but also to act on behalf of and an extension of state government to help them make better use of their own data, and most notably with California Health and Human Services Agency in the annual record reconciliation that has been sustained for many years now. So bottom line, I love data. I'm honored to be here today and thrilled to partner on this work.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathy Huang.
Hello, everyone. I am Kathy, and I am the Associate Vice President of Community Impact and Development at the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles. And I have 3 reasons why I am here. One of them is to give input from the CBO perspective as alternative touch points to our youth. And at the YMCA here in LA, we have a Cradle-to-Career Success Program Continuum, and we have an initiative called Achieve LA. So I'm happy to support through that perspective. I'm also an advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion and public health work. So I understand that educational, health, and long-term outcomes all go hand in hand. So I look forward to how we can support upward mobility of this next generation of youth in California. And then I am just really excited about data like everyone else here and how we can harness that power to drive decisions. So I am happy to be here and meet you all and look forward to continuing this work.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Heather Hugh.
Thanks. It's Heather Huff, actually, and it's okay. It's all right. It's a hard one. I'm the Executive Director of Policy Analysis for California Education, or PACE. And our work as an organization is to advance equity and improve systems that serve kids in California. My own background is very deeply rooted in data work. I've been studying California's data system and making recommendations around improving it for many years. I also have a background in improvement science and data use at the local level, and reporting about data use is extremely important. So I bring that perspective in here as well. And then finally, since 2015, PACE has had a partnership with the core districts in which they share data with us, and we run a robust data and research partnership. And so I have a lot of experience in how you organize data, organize research projects, and communicate both with the people who share that data and with the people who you hope to learn from your research and analysis.
Thank you so much, Heather Huff, and apologies for that. Next up, we have Jacob Jackson.
Hello, good morning. I'm Jake Jackson. I'm a research fellow at Public Policy Institute of California, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit think tank. And our mission is to improve public policy in California through independent, objective, and nonpartisan research. I'm here because I believe in the power of data to inform policy. And I've been engaged in this current effort, mostly through research and also serving on advisory committees, and also convening the California Education Data Collaborative, which is a group of 16 organizations invested in helping the state get this done and get this done well. So very excited to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Amber Jacobo.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Amber Jacobo, and I recently switched positions, but I was the Director of Integrated Data Systems at Fresno County Office of Ed and worked closely with our Cradle-to-Career initiative there, similar to Achieve LA, it sounds like. And I'm now the Director of Continuous Improvement at the Sacramento County Office of Ed. But in general, my whole career and my passion in life has been about how we can use and share data in an actionable way. So I've been very excited and following the progress of the Cradle-to-Career system in the state. And like many of us, and I've worked with several of you on this call, have pushed for how we can use data in an actionable way, not just like looking back on research kinds of things, which is definitely informative and helpful too, but how we can use it tomorrow to make a change for somebody who's in front of us. So happy to be here with you all.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Brendan Livingston.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brendan Livingston. I'm the Director of Enrollment Management Analytics at UC Davis. I've been doing this for 7 years. And, you know, as Tamika was saying about enrollment management, it's a very powerful group. It's got, you know, we've been talking about actionable data. Well, we, at a selective institution, we do take this data and use it actionably. And terms of who to admit and who not to admit, or financial aid resources and such. And so I'm excited about this group because it, you know, we kind of stop at graduation, and it'd be nice to see what's happening to our students after and who we're selecting before they get here. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jennifer Orlick.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Orlick. I'm the Director of Strategy, Accountability, and Innovation at Campbell Union High School District. We're a district of 6 high schools near San Jose. And I'm here because I'm, like some of my colleagues have mentioned, very interested in making data actionable. I have a lot of experience working with K-12 data and dealing with our CalPAD system, which is extremely robust and also has some growing pains, as we know, and still gives me a feeling most days that we're data rich and information poor. So as this new system is being developed, I'm really here to try to make sure I can tie this into what is this system going to do for our students, and what information will we get back as a K-12 system, and what information will higher ed and communities, organizations, and employers get that can really help us make more urgent decisions about advancing equity and closing some gaps and really expanding opportunity for all of our students, but especially the most marginalized. So that's what I'm here to do.
Thank you. Next, we have Laura Owen.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to meet you and an honor to be here with all of you. I'm excited to be part of this advisory board. I am currently the executive director for the Center for Equity and Post-Secondary Attainment at San Diego State University. We're a new center. We have officially been launched for about 1.5 years now. Prior to my work here at SDSU directing the center, I was a school counselor. I actually started my career as a school counselor, then went into district leadership. And I can tell you, I've always been about data. I remember sitting at my desk with all kinds of spreadsheets and data on my desk, and I was trying to align it all so that we could get it to the practitioners so that they understood how to use data and to make that actionable in their practice. And so that's what I'm about, maybe to no surprise, because I was such a data geek in my work, and that was kind of odd in the counseling field to find someone who was so driven by data work and really looking at evidence-based practice. I ended up in higher ed, and I've lived since then sort of this bi-coastal relationship. I started at Johns Hopkins University, then came to San Diego State, and I was teaching graduate students, helping them look at data, and then ended up, because I was doing work and a thought partner with Michelle Obama and her Retire campaign, which was really about helping all students to recognize they needed something beyond their high school diploma, whether that was an apprenticeship, on-the-job training, a certificate, 2-year, 4-year. And as a result of that, we hosted a series of White House convenings around the country on really how do we look at strengthening school counseling, specifically around advising and post-secondary access. So all my research is in that space. And then had the opportunity to open a center on the East Coast. So I went back again, opened a center in Washington, DC, and thrilled to come back. We're not moving again. We are on the West Coast for good. And I couldn't be happier to be part of this. I'm excited to learn from all of you. And I really strongly believe the only reason we should do research and create data systems like this is so that practitioners, families, and students have access to it and can use it, that it drives the practice. And I'm K-12 and higher ed, and I think it works well in both spaces. So excited to be here.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Vikash Reddy.
Thanks so much. Vikash Reddy, Vice President of Research at the Campaign for College Opportunity. The campaign is an advocacy organization headquartered in Los Angeles, but with offices also in Sacramento, so very focused on California, and advocating for access for minoritized students, traditionally marginalized populations, and also thinking about the idea that institutions, once we enroll students who maybe are not traditional students, now the institution maybe needs to look a little less traditional itself. And so thinking about not simply enrollment for students, but support and what that looks like along the way. We take a very data heavy approach and research heavy approach to our advocacy strategy. And so that's a big portion of what I do, is to lead the research agenda. I'm particularly excited to be part of this body, not just for the company that I'm about to keep, but because I think about the reports that I've been writing for the last 3 years while I've been at the campaign, and every single one of them has used at least 2 or more of the public dashboards, or of the several public dashboards maintained by each of the 3 systems, as well as the Student Aid Commission's data sets, as well as the CDE, as well as iPads and the census. And wouldn't it be lovely if we could marry these all together in ways that let us tell an actually more detailed and nuanced story than the ones that we're able to create when we cobble it all together. So here with those lenses, and like I say, really excited to join all of you in this work.
Thank you, Vikash. Next, we have Liberty Van Natten.
Hi, everybody. My name is Liberty Van Natten. I, like Amber, kind of transitioned positions from when I first got on this board. So my previous role, I was an education research evaluation administrator at the California Department of Education. worked specifically with federal data reporting, data requests, data liaisons across state agencies, and the Cradle-to-Career work specifically within the department. Since my new position, it was an interesting transition. I'm now in the state of Washington. I am the Director of Data Governance for the Washington Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. So still very much in the K-12 statewide data perspective. And I feel like that's primarily what I bring to this group. But previous to those really data heavy hats, I was a teacher. I did work at the school district, the county office of ed level as well. So hoping to incorporate all of that perspective and really happy to be here.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Davis Foe.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, I'm at a hotel, so my Wi-Fi is a little spotty. My name is Davis Foe. I'm currently a PhD student at UCLA in their higher education and organizational change program. I'm studying community college practice, policy and research, and have written about California's developmental education reforms, as well as their community college baccalaureate. I was brought to this work because I've always been guided by fostering educational equity, improving social economic conditions, and advancing social justice. In the last decade or so, I've worked across California's education system as a practitioner and as an institutional researcher. So I've seen how powerful data and research can be in terms of how we make sense and frame our understanding of students' trajectories, and how that ultimately informs decisions made by practitioners, policymakers, and other education leaders. So I'm super excited to be here, honored to be here, and looking forward to learning with everyone.
Well, thank you so much. It's incredibly inspiring to hear about all of the work that you have been leading and the perspectives you'll be able to bring to this work. We're really grateful and look forward to hearing the recommendations that you share with us. So what we're going to do today, this is sort of the easy advisory board meeting for you. Today is about an orientation. You were officially sworn in and seated. And we wanted to be mindful of the fact that some of you have been engaged over the last 2 years in the planning process, and you know all the ins and outs of the Cradle-to-Career data system. And some of you are new to this work. And so we wanted to start by sharing a little bit of an overview of what came out of the planning process, what's been defined so far, so that you all have the kind of context that we're working with. And then we'll take a bit of a break. We'll talk more about what it means to be an advisory board member, and then have that icebreaker conversation that Sydney mentioned at the beginning. And then before the meeting that we have at the end of next month, at the end of October, we'll be sending you more work to do, if you will, where we'll be asking for your input on some of the things that are on our plate in a more concrete way. So just wanted to provide that context. Today is sort of the day for you to relax and listen and learn more about what we have planned so far, and feel free to jump in with questions if you have them. I also wanted to flag for members of the public who might have joined us after we went through that agenda, we do have a time set aside for public comment a little bit later in the meeting. So if you have questions that you would like to share or comments you'd like to make, we will be welcoming public comment after the next 2 sessions. And in the meanwhile, if you're a member of the advisory board, please feel free to jump in with questions. Okay, with that, let me give a bit of an overview on where we are with Cradle-to-Career. So by way of background, as you know, in 2019, California enacted the Cradle-to-Career Data System Act. And this called for the establishment of a state longitudinal data system to link existing education, social services, and workforce information. So this is an important piece of context for all of us to know and to share as people ask us questions about it. We at Cradle-to-Career are not planning to collect new data. This is about linking data together that our data providers already have and making it more usable. So the Act articulated the scope of an 18-month planning process to be shaped by a work group that consists of the partner entities named in the Act. And that planning process was overseen by the Governor's Office and managed by WestEd and ran from January 2020 to June 2021. I want to thank Kathy Booth, who's on this session with us. So if you have questions about the planning process that come up, feel free to share those as well. All right, so how did that planning process go about? It was a really collaborative approach to designing what this data system should be and what it should look like. So the partner entities spanned a lot of different areas. So early learning in K-12, working with CDE, post-secondary, noting all three of the public higher education segments, as well as the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities, AICCU, the Bureau for Private and Post-Secondary Education. So as you'll see in the 5-year timeline that we'll share later on, we have a plan to initially start with the public university data, but then also work to bring in data from our non-public universities here in California. We worked with education-related entities like the Student Aid Commission and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, employment and workforce training. So we'll be getting our employment-related data like unemployment insurance data from EDD, social services and health. So California Department of Social Services, whose early childhood data will be brought in, California Health and Human Services, and then data experts from the Department of Technology and from California School Information Services. So these were our partner entities from the kind of data provider and government perspective, and many members of the public also helped to develop the proposals and the recommendations that shaped the legislation that ultimately launched our office last summer and the many recommendations that we're now building on. So the 2 advisory groups on policy and analytics and practice and operations, and also 5 subcommittees that dug into different areas in detail. And some of you were on those subcommittees and advisory groups, so we're delighted that you're still engaged. Overall, more than 200 people were involved in the planning process, and we're delighted by how open and transparent the planning process happened. Really have benefited a lot from all of the input that has come from members of the public, from advocates, from researchers, from practitioners, and want that guiding principle of doing our work in public with transparency to continue as we now build the system. So what's the purpose of the Cradle-to-Career data system? So the vision is to connect individuals and organizations with trusted information and resources, to provide critical insights along the milestones in the pipeline from early care to K-12 to higher education, skills training and employment, to empower individuals to reach their full potential and foster evidence-based decision-making to build more equitable futures. And that last piece about building equitable futures is really central to our work. It came through very clearly in AB 132, the legislation that established our office. It's what we as an office and I as the executive director am held accountable for by the governing board. And as we think about how we bring the data together, how we make it available in dashboards, how we make it available in query builders, the ability to disaggregate data, the ability to put data in the hands of individuals who can work to advance equity and to do that shared work together is a really central part of our work. And that relates to the overall mission. So to be California's source of actionable data and research on education, economic, and health outcomes for individuals, families, and communities, and to expand access to tools and services to navigate the education to employment pipeline. So why is this work needed? Another way of thinking about this is that linking data is a way for institutions to talk to each other. Ben Cheetah, who's been a real champion for this work in the governor's office, has often framed it this way, that as we work to address some of the barriers that students face, right? The barriers they face in trying to apply to college, apply to financial aid, figuring out which of their courses map to the requirements that our four-year universities have. These kinds of things should be easier and more streamlined from the student's perspective, and institutions talking to each other and sharing data so we can improve our understanding of what's working and what could work better is one of the first steps in how we can better coordinate all of this. And a guiding principle in all of this is that we need to center the needs of students and families. So this is literally, again, written into the legislation that launched our office, to have a focus on user-centered design, to have a focus on the needs of the students, and work across institutions, across different organizations here within the state and beyond, so that we can think about the experience an individual student has, an individual young person has, and aim to make that more smooth, to remove barriers, to remove obstacles that they face. So what are we building? The work that we're doing fits in 3 main buckets. So let me just talk about that briefly, and then we'll dive into each one in more detail. So in the green circle at the top of this graphic, you can see it says data on education and job outcomes. That's what we've been calling the analytical data set. It's that linked longitudinal data system that we're building by bringing together data from our data partners, linking it, and making it available to people. So that's the linked data set that we're building. In orange on the left, you can see it says tools to support college planning and transition. So in the legislation, there were 2 tools identified. One is californiacolleges.edu, which is a platform that facilitates applying to college, career planning, financial aid applications. And the state is investing in making that available at no cost to districts. So we're supporting our partners at CCGI and bringing that tool to scale. The second tool that was mentioned specifically is eTranscript California, and we'll talk more in our 5-year timeline. You can see our plans to discuss with our partners how eTranscript California can be strengthened and scaled up, and include potentially new components and the ability to transmit transcripts and credentials. And then the third area of work in purple on the right is called training and outreach. And we're really thinking about that as comprehensive community engagement. That's not only about ensuring that once we've created a shiny dashboard that people hear about it and can learn to use it, but that we're reaching out and getting input at the beginning as we build our dashboards, as we decide how data definitions should be defined, and we bring the data together to really continue what was started during the planning process of listening to communities, listening to community partners about what their needs are, what they want to see, what data would be helpful and actionable and useful to them. So those are the 3 main areas of our work. So who are our partners? Earlier this summer, we signed data use agreements and legal agreements with 15 partners. So there's 16 of us as a part of this shared effort. And it really goes from cradle to career. So you can see Department of Social Services, who among other things will have the early childhood integrated data system brought in, Health and Human Services data, which I put here with the stroller, but that really continues throughout the cradle to career journey. And then K-12 education, we have agreements with CDE and with CSIS. And then in higher ed, as I mentioned, we have not only the public segments, so community colleges, CSU, University of California, but also the nonprofit and public entities and the Student Aid Commission. One thing I want to note, as you can see from this list, we've signed data use agreements at the institution level. So we will be getting data, for example, from the CSU Chancellor's Office, not from Cal State Long Beach directly, right? From CDE, not from individual LEAs. So the data we are getting, the data partnerships we've formed are at the institution level with data that's already being collected and aggregated. And then at the bottom, you can see as we get to the career stage, we're going to get, for example, unemployment insurance data from EDD. So this is kind of the overview of which 15 entities have have signed data use agreements with us and will be working to share their data with us. So that data will then be available in 3 different ways. So during the planning process, there were 200 data points that were identified to be a part of this data set. And we will create 3 different ways to access this: via dashboards, via the query builder, and the research request process. So each dashboard will tell a particular story. The first one we're working on that was identified and prioritized during the planning process is the teacher training and retention dashboard. So this is being responsive to questions around teacher shortages, how to be able to better understand how teachers are currently being trained and credentialed, where they then teach, and what happens if they leave the teaching profession. So that's that dashboard, and we're working on that currently, and we'll be looking to get your input on it. The query builder is sort of the choose your own adventure model for accessing data at an aggregate level from the data set. So for each dashboard, there will be an accompanying query builder where people can disaggregate and say, okay, show me this information, but just for my county, or show me this information, but disaggregate it by race and ethnicity, or show me this information for this particular subset of students. So that will enable researchers and others to be able to generate their own tables of aggregated information in a privacy protected way. And then we'll also be building a research request process. And you, especially with the Data and Tools Advisory Board, are going to be closely involved with this over time. So we're essentially going to create a common application, if you will, where researchers and analysts can come to us and say, I would like to request data from these 3 different entities that you've signed data use agreements with. And we can then facilitate that application process and share that with those data providers who then take the decision. So that's something that we will be looking to you for input on how to finalize and develop that process, and then also review it on an annual basis. Okay, so now let's shift gears a little bit and talk a bit more concretely to imagine what could some of these tools and resources look like in practice. So these are examples that were developed during the planning process as inspiration of what we are aspiring to here. So for example, foster youth. What if students could authorize the Department of Social Services to alert colleges they apply to about their status as foster youth, so the college can work with them from day one about financial aid and other supports that are available to them. And college students, when students send an electronic transcript when they apply to college and include examples of badges or competency-based certifications. Next slide, thank you. And then examples of tools for students, for families and educators. So college and career planning. And many of these examples on this particular slide are being provided currently by California colleges.edu. So families being able to access information about education and career options. Parents can see whether their children are on track to meet A to G requirements and can work with schools to make course corrections if a course perhaps wasn't listed in a way that was being picked up by the data systems, or to know which courses need to be taken next year. On financial aid, and this is relevant for the universal FAFSA and CADA completion. So high school counselors can view whether students are completing their financial aid applications and provide more support to ensure that students can afford higher education. And better data, so high schools can get help to ensure their courses are correctly flagged for A to G status, so there aren't problems with students' college applications. And A to G status is referring to the requirements that CSU and UC have in applications for our four-year universities. And then examples of the dashboards. So as I mentioned, we'll create different dashboards over time. Each one will tell a particular story and look at a particular topic in more detail. In a way that lets anyone, non-technical audience, members of the public, families, practitioners, look at this important information. And we're going to design them in a way that allows users to see trends over time and also outcomes for different groups of students and the ability to disaggregate. So we can look, results at the local, institutional, regional, and statewide level on things like, this first bullet point relates to that teacher dashboard that I just mentioned. We'll also be looking at things like, what are the long-term impacts of chronic absenteeism, or, which colleges do students apply to and get accepted to and enroll in persistence. So you can kind of see that over time. How many students are eligible for financial aid but don't apply? How many apply but don't receive it, right? And then looking at questions around living wages. So these are the kinds of comprehensive questions that we'd like to, build the data infrastructure for, so that they can be addressed and answered. And then the query builders, right? So as I mentioned, this is the choose your own adventure approach where you can generate a table or charts on specific outcomes. So you can look at how things vary based on institutional context, like things like suspension rates or other things, the family context, and their learning context overall. So the query builder will allow people to create a more customized view of the information that we're pulling together. And then a focus on privacy and neutrality. And again, this is something where, your input and your partnership on ensuring that we're as strong as possible on both of these areas will be very helpful. So one thing that was determined through the planning process and in the legislation is that this data system and our work is hosted by an independent third party. That's us, right? That's the Office of Cradle-to-Career. We're housed within the Government Operations Agency with oversight from our governing board that's accountable to taxpayers. And this neutrality point is important. So we are not envisioning becoming a mini think tank that issues policy statements or policy briefs in that way. We'll summarize the data, we'll put out these dashboards, but we'll really look to our partners within and beyond government to set research agendas and conduct the research with the data that we're stewards of. When looking at the education and career outcomes from that linked data set, the public will only see trends and summaries for anonymized group of students. So, aggregated in groups with individual information kept private. And then for research purposes, the individual identities will always be hidden and won't be available to anyone. And then the studies must be approved through a data request process. So those first bullet points are all about the linked data set that we're building. And then the last bullet point here is about the californiacolleges.edu and eTranscript California work. So those services, those practical tools for students and families are separate from this data set that we're building, and families and students access that through a password protected interface. Okay, timeline. We updated the 5-year timeline that was developed during the planning process. You can find it on our homepage. This is just a picture to give you a sense of what it looks like so that when you find it on our homepage, you know you found the right thing. Obviously, the typeface is far too small for you to read. But if you would like to take a look at that, that gives you much more detail about what's planned for the current year and in the coming years. So this is the 5-year timeline from the time the legislation passed last summer. So we're already in year 2. And have an ambitious timeline to ensure that we can get to the destinations outlined in the legislation by summer 2026. So if you look at this, you can see, for example, when we're going to be having conversations to try to explore opportunities for bringing more credential-based information into transcript transfer services, or when we'll be working on getting data from higher education institutions outside the public state universities. So this is a timeline that may be an interesting resource for you to dig into between now and our next advisory board meeting. Okay, let me pause before we talk about our governance and see if there are any questions from our advisory board members about anything I've shared so far.
I'm really curious about the use case of putting data towards, eliminating some of the transition barriers from K-12 to higher ed, such as to what extent could this data or e-transcripts be used to actually pre-enroll students, or eliminating like the FAFSA, for example. So I don't know if those are part of the use cases or things that we could, as advisory board members, kind of give thought to or add to over time.
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand your question, is it about whether the transfer of transcripts from, if I'm a high school student and I'm applying to community college or I'm applying to a 4-year university, if that can be facilitated?
Yeah, and is that part of the work of this group to sort of help to imagine the extent to which the data can be leveraged? So yeah, there's a continuum, right? Like an e-transcript can be just a transcript that sits on it can be used maybe even for such a thing as pre-enrollment.
Yes, that's a great question. So a lot of those questions are things that californiacolleges.edu is tackling for the specific use case of, I'm graduating high school and I'm enrolling in college. So ensuring that the transcripts can be used by institutions in exactly the way that you described, so that when I show up at college, there's much better information about what courses I've already taken and what I can do next. There are a lot of opportunities that we can explore together of what more could be done around, for example, dual enrollment, students who are taking community college classes while they're in high school, or community college students who are taking classes at other universities at the same time, to ensure that that transcript transfer process is much more streamlined than students are currently experiencing it as. So there are opportunities for us to think about what services California Colleges.edu currently provides, what eTranscript currently provides, which is mainly community colleges to four-year university, that path of transmitting information, and how we could work together to imagine a university transcript, a kind of transcript transfer service comprehensively that uses both of those tools and addresses some of the areas that currently are still a little bit hard for students to navigate. So that's a great question.
And I just want to also plug or just plant that seed to help us to imagine to what extent can financial information also be leveraged to help set that student up for. So it seems increasingly in California that is the primary barrier.
Yes, thank you. That was the second part to your comment. So part of what was discussed during the planning process is how we could develop tools and build into the tools that we're scaling up an opportunity for a student to give the state information once, if you will, and have that be shared with different entities in a way that makes the process of receiving services, receiving financial aid much more streamlined. So thank you for that comment. Any other questions from advisory board members before we talk about governance?
Will school districts have access to individual student-based data at the local level?
That's a great question. So that differs based on what we're talking about. So the data set that we're linking across the 15 different entities, that information is only going to be available without identities to anyone, right? Including researchers who access it. The individual student identities will never be visible in that linked data set. That's different from the California Colleges.edu platform, for instance, where school districts can see, oh, I see that Marianne started the financial aid form, but hasn't submitted it yet. Let me reach out to her and support her in that. Or the counselor can see which students are on track with ADG requirements and which ones aren't. So that's a password protected interface that works directly with districts. That information is separate from the linked data set that we're building for research purposes. So schools can see it for the California Colleges.edu information. They can see that information. They will not be able to see individual level student information in the research data set, and no one will. That will only be available for research purposes in a de-identified and privacy protected way. Thank you for that question. Okay, there will be more chances for discussion and questions, but let me tell you a little bit more about our governance structure. This is part of what makes California's work really unique. So our governing board, the Cradle-to-Career Governing Board, is a 21-member board. I report to this board. They're the ones who select the executive director. I'm accountable to them. They're the ones who write my annual performance review. And this governing board was created to balance and bring in the perspectives both of the data providers and that government perspective, as well as appointed members of the public. So about half of the governing board is composed of designees of our data partners. And about half of the governing board is composed of appointed members who are appointed by the governor's office and by the legislature, who bring the perspectives of the public, of the end user of the data system, of researchers and advocates. So the governing board is composed of both of those perspectives, and it's created a very, kind of a governance structure that really builds the focus of the data system on being an advancing equity and being very inclusive of communities in its decision-making, literally into its decision-making structure. So the votes the governing board takes includes both of those perspectives. The board meets quarterly. The next meeting will be in November. If you're interested, please feel free to dial in and listen in to those governing board meetings so that you have the context for the decisions that they're taking. So that's our governing board overall. And then, as you know, we have two advisory boards. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We have you, the Data and Tools Advisory Board. And the purpose of this advisory board is to ensure that the data tools we're creating provide actionable information and for you to help identify ways to improve access to that information. And what will that look like in practice? For example, that includes defining and structuring data points, for example, for the dashboards, and operationalizing that data request process that I talked about, where researchers can request access to data from our data providers. So that's the Data and Tools Advisory Board. And then we also have a community engagement advisory board. They were seated yesterday, so we officially have that advisory board on deck as well. And they're tasked with ensuring that there's strong feedback loops with data users to support evidence-based decision-making and analytical capacity and equitable access to this information, including ensuring that what we're building is understandable and useful, both in terms of it being intuitive and in terms of language and just comprehensively. They will also be helping us with planning outreach about the free resources available at californiacolleges.edu and really advising on the user experience. And if any of this stuff speaks to you, I think there's going to be some overlap in the topics that we discussed. So if you're excited about talking about user experience, that doesn't mean we can't discuss that in this advisory board as well. So the next resource I just wanted to highlight, I think you're all familiar with the current data system website, or the current Cradle-to-Career data system website, but we also still have the website live. WestEd has it live from the planning process. So if you're curious and you think, I wonder if this topic, right, whether it's around privacy or disaggregation of data, or how are we thinking about defining race and ethnicity, given that different data providers have collected data in different ways. Those kinds of questions, there are a lot of reports and summaries and recommendations that are still up on the data planning website. And if you're interested in digging into that, please feel free to. Also, please feel free to reach out to us. There's a lot of information. It may be hard to find what you're looking for. So feel free to shoot Sydney an email or myself or other members of the team and say, hey, did anyone do work on this already? I'd love to know what work was done on that, and we can help point you to the relevant resource. Okay, so that concludes the overview of the data system overall. Any other questions from our advisory board members? And again, members of the public, if you've joined us recently, we will have a moment for public comment towards the end of the meeting. Okay, with that, I will turn it back over to Sydney.
Great, thank you. So I am aware that we have been on Zoom for a little while now. So I'm sure all of us can use a break to adjust fluid levels, stretch, do some yoga, whatever you need to do. So we will take an 11-minute break. I'll do the same thing I did yesterday for community engagement. I'll give y'all an extra 60 seconds. So we will come back at 10:50. So we will reconvene in 11 minutes at 10:50. So I'll try to give updates and warnings to let y'all know when to come back. So 10:50. Thank you. Hi, everybody. This is your 4-minute warning. We'll reconvene in 4 minutes. Thanks. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you all had a good break, and hopefully we're ready to go to learn more about your role as advisory board members. So next slide, please. So I'll just kind of talk about your role as an advisory board member and what it means to serve on the Data and Tools Advisory Board. So as you all know, the Data and Tools Advisory Board will examine whether the data system is providing actionable information and identifying ways to improve access to that information. So your first task for the rest of this calendar year into next year will include 2 things. And the first is advising on the implications of how data points are defined and data sets will be structured for the dashboards and query builder. And that's starting with the teacher training and retention dashboard. The second task is advising on how the data request process will be operationalized. Next slide, please. So as a board member, you have a couple of duties. So the first is to attend the meetings. So we hope to have at least 2 either in-person or virtual meetings per year. Please note, I did say at least, so there is an opening for potentially having more meetings. And you will also receive reimbursement for your travel, especially if you are outside of the 100-mile radius of Sacramento. So if we do reconvene in person at some point, we'll share more information about how travel reimbursement works. But for right now, the meetings will be held virtually. All board meetings, whether in person or virtual, are subject to something called the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. And so we'll have our general counsel, Ron Marriott, talk about that here in a couple moments, but it is state statute. And so that is something that all of our board meetings are subject to. We also ask that you review all of the draft documents in advance of the meeting so you can come well prepared to the meetings. Of course, we'd love for you to gather input from and share information with your community members, your stakeholders, your colleagues, folks that you interact with every day. And then also the last one should not be a surprise because that's why I was in your inbox this year, completing forms to document any potential conflicts of interest. So it's very, very, very important that you submit the annual Form 700 to me timely. That is state law. So I do need to have that on file. So if you keep seeing my name in your inbox about that Form 700, that's why. And of course, if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. Next slide, please. So as a board member, representatives of specific institutions can serve no more than 1 consecutive term and can only have 1 seat on an advisory board at a time. And that's to really help with representation. We'd like to have a diverse group of board members to just make sure that we hear from multiple perspectives and that we don't feel like, only one voice speaks louder than the others. We also have a quorum requirement. The quorum for our meetings is that 2/3 of the membership of the advisory board must be present for us to continue with meetings. And so doing the math, that's 11 members. So please keep that in mind. As you have meetings, filling up your calendar, we definitely try to plan the meetings for about a year out. So I'll be sending more information here in the next coming weeks to get some holds on your calendars. But please keep that in mind that attendance is extremely important because if we don't have quorum, we cannot continue with the meeting. And then I have to bug you all about your schedules all over again, which I'm sure you do not want. So just keep that quorum requirement in mind. And then of course, please refer to our governance manual on the C2C website. I'll also send around a version of the governance manual as well. The advisory board sections start, I think, roughly on page 27. So please familiarize yourself with that. But of course, if any questions come up or any concerns about your role as a board member, please reach out to me. I'm here to support you all. Next slide, please. And so I'll turn it over to Mary Ann to talk a little bit more about like the statutory requirements for our board members and more of the legal responsibilities of the advisory board. Mary Ann?
Thank you, Sydney. So one of the opportunities that you have as the inaugural Data and Tools Advisory Board is to help us think through not only the substance of things where we're getting your input, but also some process questions around the governance of the advisory board itself. So what I'm going to walk through in the next couple of slides are excerpts. So it's not everything, but it's much of what is in that governance manual that Sydney was just mentioning. So just by way of background, the governance manual is a living document that the governing board created and updates over time. So the last update was made at the May governing board meeting, and at least once a year, the governing board reviews the governance manual and updates it. Most of the governance manual is about the work of the board itself and how they go about their work. There's some information in there about the advisory boards, but not everything is kind of spelled out yet. So let's go through what's there, and then we'll talk about process on that. So the authority and the responsibilities we just looked at, that's overall for what the Data and Tools Advisory Board is required to do. And then in terms of the member expectations, here's what has been drafted in the governance manual so far. So ensure that appropriate resources are aligned to support the work of the data system, ensure the technical tools of the data system are working as intended, ensure their attendance or that of a designated representative, advocate for the Cradle-to-Career data system to key stakeholders. So let me just zoom in on one process point, for example, on attendance, right? During this fiscal year, as Sydney, I think, mentioned earlier on, we have flexibility to hold our meetings remotely. So the adjustments to the Bagley-Keene Act that require open meetings, that was extended through this current fiscal year. So we have the potential to host our meetings remotely. We very much hope that that will help ensure that everyone can attend, but we also realize that sometimes things come up or people are sick. We have not defined a process of whether there should be a way for people to have a designated representative who attends in their place. Is that something that the governing board would need to do for each of you? Is that something that we just want to try to avoid by having high enough attendance at our meetings so that we have a cohesive group of people who know each other? And our conversations can really pick up where they left off last time. So this is an example of the kinds of questions that we could work through. If we, for example, wanted to create an ad hoc committee of this advisory board to work through some of those governance questions. Similarly, do you want to all come to these meetings as members that we facilitate and we help divide, help you put together the recommendations, or do you want there to be specific roles within this advisory board? A lot of this is a brand new board, and a lot of these things have not yet been defined. So I just wanted to flag that so you can think about that between now and our October meeting, and we can shape some of that together. Next slide. So this is how decision-making is described, and let's walk through this as well. The Data and Tools Advisory Board provides input and feedback and makes recommendations to the governing board. Decisions are made by consensus. So again, the main purpose, if you look at AB 132, the legislation that established our office and talked about the creation of these advisory boards, the purpose of the advisory board is to provide recommendations to the governing board. But it's not a formal governing board with a threshold for votes like the governing board is. You provide recommendations, and the proposed mechanism is that decisions are made by consensus. You can think about and provide input and discuss amongst each other how you want to define that process of coming to consensus. Again, do you want specific roles for different people, or do you want us to facilitate and you come here and share your thoughts and come to that organically? The second part of this, so let me just talk through this as well. Recommendations are paired with feasibility studies by the office regarding data availability, reliability, and validity, legal requirements, startup and ongoing costs to the office and to the data providers, potential approaches for collecting the information, and any political or other implications that would jeopardize the neutrality of the office. So the governing board has defined this in this way, that we're providing essentially a service to you as the advisory board, where if you say, here's a recommendation that we think we'd like to advance, could you as an office look into the feasibility of the following? So maybe you want to know, can you estimate, we as staff at the office, can you do the work of figuring out how much would this cost? Or like what entity could implement what we're recommending, or what are potential approaches? Here's the objective we want to get to, and can you research what other data systems are doing? What are potential approaches we can get there? So there's this provision that we as an office can provide the service to you of doing a feasibility study for all of the recommendations that you'd like to advance, so that when that then goes to the governing board, they can consider it in the full context of what it would mean to implement that recommendation. So that's something that, Sydney is the one who spearheads this work, and she will coordinate with our staff team to be able to do these feasibility studies together with you. And again, there's an opportunity for you to think about process. So for example, do you as a group just want to, in these meetings, say, all right, here's the recommendation we'd like you to do a feasibility study on, come back to us when you've figured that out? Do you want to designate 1 or 2 liaisons who work closely with our office on a given feasibility study? Those are the sorts of process things that we can propose processes for you to consider. If you would like to form an ad hoc committee or something of that nature to work through that with us, that's also a possibility. And then in terms of responsibilities, so the Data and Tools Advisory Board will ensure the continued technical development, maintenance, and operation of the Cradle-to-Career system and its ability to ensure privacy and comply with current and emerging standards for technology, and may establish ad hoc committees as needed. So again, the ad hoc committee, think of that as a tool. It's a way for you to say a subset of us are going to work with, perhaps members of the staff, perhaps other technical experts you bring in to solve a particular issue. The Data and Tools Advisory Board develops suggestions to improve the usability and usefulness of the data and tools for the governing board. So including but not limited to. So your recommendations might relate to the dashboard visualizations, data points in the query builder, the operational tools. So that's californiacolleges.edu, eTranscript California, and the data request process. And this is continued from that responsibility section. Each year, the Data and Tools Advisory Board will review all prior data requests to facilitate the continuous improvement of the data request process and ensure that it is clear, transparent, fair, and efficient, including identifying mechanisms that would enable appropriate data requests to be fulfilled. So this is what I alluded to earlier on. As I mentioned, we're going to develop a data request process, that common application, if you will, that researchers can use to request data that we've linked in our linked data set. And then each year, you as a board, one of your responsibilities will be to review all the requests that came in and the decisions that were made, and review that in a public meeting and provide feedback and recommendations on continuous improvement of that data request process. So that's an important aspect of being transparent about how data requests are being fulfilled. Okay, so I think those are the main things we wanted to cover on the responsibilities of the Data and Tools Advisory Board specifically. What questions might advisory board members have for Sydney and I?
So on the most recent slide, I was talking about reviewing the data requests. So I'm imagining those are like for academic research projects of some kind. Will we also have access to see the user user data in terms of how the report is being used? Which click-throughs are being accessed most frequently, or where people might seem to stop? Or is there like going to be an embedded feedback tool, like did you get what you needed, or that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to answer the first part, yes, this would be reviewing the requests that came in for what we've called the researcher request process. So it could be someone at a research institution or a university or elsewhere is requesting the anonymized individual data for research purposes. On the other component, so that's a great question, right? Would you like to see metrics of what kinds of engagement did the dashboards actually get, and at some granular detail, and what feedback mechanisms do we want to build into the website? that's exactly the kind of thing that you can ask us to do, right? As an advisory board, to work with Ryan and his team to say, here are the kinds of metrics we would be most interested in seeing. If you want our input on whether these data and data tools are actually being useful, here's the kind of user information or use metrics from the website that we would need to see as an advisory board in order to be able to provide useful input and feedback. So definitely that's something that you can do, and we can take that into account as we set up the tools in the website. Thank you for that question. Yes, see another hand from Alex.
Yeah, I was wondering about in terms of like the running of the meetings, are the advisory boards electing chairs, or is the office taking care of all of that for us? And I'm just curious about the operation of all of this.
Thank you for asking that question. That's actually something that has not been defined yet and that we could explore through an ad hoc committee. So in the governance documents so far, there's no mention of a chair, but there's also no mention of not having a chair. So you can think about that. And some of this is up to your preferences. It would create a significant time commitment for an individual to serve as chair of a board. But that would also be a mechanism for you to govern yourselves and think about how you want to, engage in this work together. So that's if you're interested in these kinds of things, perhaps what we can do is via email after the meeting, create a mechanism if you want to sign up for an ad hoc committee to explore this governance question with us and perhaps together with our governing board, we could do that. So I think our default plan is that we are here as an office to serve you and to make this process as streamlined as possible so we can do the work of preparing for these meetings, of facilitating the conversations if you would like us to. If you would like to, in rotation or as a role that's defined, have kind of offices within the advisory board, we can work together to develop a structure for that too. So again, this is part of the opportunity of being the very first advisory board is you can think about, what would the best mechanisms and structures be? I also realize that that's a very big question and that you've signed up to provide feedback on very specific things. And so our default is that, we as an office can think about what we think might work and bring that to you, and you can reflect on that. Or if some of you would like to get involved in that more deeply, we can create an ad hoc committee and dig into the details too, together. Thank you for asking that, Alex. Yes, Liberty.
This might be a silly question, I don't know, but are ad hoc committees subject to the Bagley-Keene Act?
That is a great question, Liberty. The short answer is that by default, assume that ad hoc committees would also be subject to Bagley-Keene. There are, specific cases. Actually, next we're going to talk about Bagley-Keene. So I'm going to defer that question, and Ron in a moment is going to walk you through Bagley-Keene, and he is much more qualified to answer the very nuanced question. But the long and short of it is, if we are working with one or more board members on a very specific question, our office can facilitate doing some of that work directly on things that we then bring back. But if you're taking decisions as a group and you're coming together to discuss things, by default, assume that things are subject to Bagley-Keene, which again, this year until next summer, at least, we have the ability to convene virtually, which makes it much more feasible to get together and discuss a particular item if we don't have to all show up in Sacramento on a particular day. So more to come on Bagley-Keene in a moment from our legal counsel. Any other questions? Okay, if something more comes up, feel free to jump in later, but I'll turn it back over to Sydney.
Perfect, thank you. So next slide, please. So now I'll turn it over to Ron Marriott. He's our general counsel, and he's going to give an overview about the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. So Ron?
Thank you very much, Sydney, and good morning, members of the board. It's a good juncture in the proceedings. Some of you may be wondering what is a Bagley-Keene. Others of you are apparently already familiar. I had planned to give just a very brief overview here in this first meeting of the board as part of the orientation to the board responsibilities and duties, but I'll try to answer that question that was raised at the end. But recognize that we are arranging to have a representative from the Attorney General's office give their standard briefing at the next meeting in October. So this is intended as a high level, and I've got one reading assignment for you at the end so that perhaps you'll be more informed. But for those of you who are familiar with state government, you may know what this Open Meeting Act is. There's a local government version called the Brown Act that is very similar. Some of you may be familiar with that. And some of you may have no idea at all. But there's an open meeting law that has these guiding principles that you see here, that the work you're doing here on this board should be open to the public so that the public can monitor and provide some input. If I could have the next slide, please. And again, this is just intended as a high level. The basic requirements can be broken down into these summaries. The text of the law is, dense and there's a lot of if, buts, and wherefores, but basically notice, open meetings, and providing for public comment. And these are the nuts and bolts that the staff will help arrange for you. So we're not expecting that any of you will have to ensure that the advance notice and the sessions are open. These are the things that the staff will help handle for you so that you can concentrate on the meetings themselves. But I do want to highlight one thing before next month's meeting, and that's on the next slide, please. You as a board, and this may be the concept that's counterintuitive or new to some of you, you have to avoid what's called a serial meetings or a serial meeting or meetings by another name. And that means you're supposed to do your work in the meetings. And if you got on the phone with some of your colleagues and other board members, or were exchanging emails about a topic of the board business, that would be considered a meeting. And that's not supposed to happen. So text, emails, posting about a topic of board business is something you should refrain from doing, because that would qualify as a meeting or a serial meeting under Bagley-Keene. And instead, you're supposed to do your work in the meeting. And if I could have the next slide, please. So we are going to provide you with the full text. As I say, it's dense, not so easy to read. But what is easy to read is, or easier anyway, is the handy guide to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. That comes from the Attorney General's office. And if you do nothing else before the next meeting, please read the first page and a half or 2 pages, which orients you to the thinking why the legislature has made this decree and a trade-off. It sacrifices some efficiency for the purpose of public transparency. And then, as I said, at the next meeting in October, we expect a representative from the Attorney General's office to give a slightly more detailed presentation and with an expert there to answer your questions. But as to the question that came up just before I started presenting, an ad hoc committee, if it's got more than 2 members of this body, would certainly be subject to Bagley-Keene. So by default, a committee, whatever you want to call it, the word committee is not significant, but if a subsection of this group meets together to do the work, if it's more than 2 members, it's going to also be subject to Bagley-Keene, which would mean then you should be doing the work in public. So with that, I'd ask, that was, as I say, intended as a brief overview to help orient you before the next meeting. And some of you may be much more familiar with the open meeting laws than others, but happy to answer questions, follow up about the earlier question or any other new questions while I'm here. Well, all right, and I can be reached by email if you have questions. Go through Sydney if you'd like. Please reach out to me, but please do read at least the first couple of pages of that handy guide, which we will circulate. I believe it's already posted, and I believe Sydney may have provided a link to it in some of the emails she sent out in preparation for this meeting, but it will help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. Yes, and Shannon was very gracious enough to post the link to that the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act guide in the chat as well for our board members. So thank you so much. Okay, and so now we'll have time for public comment. So members of the public who would like to comment should use the question and answer feature, the Q&A feature, to send a message to indicate your interest. So during the public comment period, we'll unmute you when it's your turn. If you'd like to give verbal public comment, if you'd like to give written public comment, please still use that Q&A feature and submit it. Please, if you are giving verbal comments, please limit your comments to 2 minutes, just to make sure that we have time for everyone to submit public comment. And also, please keep in mind that while we attempt and we try our hardest to maintain a very transparent and responsive process, our board members and staff are not necessarily required to respond to public comment. So if you have a question, please submit it through Q&A, but please just know that we're not necessarily obligated. We may need to take some time to do some research or something like that to get back to you. So I will go ahead and open it up for public comment. And then also if you have a public comment to submit later on today or something like that, please submit your public comments via email to the email address that is on the slide, info@c2c.ca.gov. So I'll go ahead and open it up. Again, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom and submit your interest. And if you are giving verbal comment, please try to keep your comments to 2 minutes. Thank you. So it looks like we have one person who would like to give public comment. Let's see. Regil, can you allow Liz Guillen, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. I always mess that up. Can you allow her to unmute herself?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. Public Advocates is a nonprofit law firm and advocacy organization that challenges the systemic causes of poverty and racial discrimination by strengthening community voices in public policy and achieving tangible victories advancing education. We see getting to this point as a tangible victory. Data about teachers in our education system is foundational to equitable access. I want to emphasize a theme that Mary Ann lifted up, the importance of data that is accessible to parents, students, and community members for their local and state advocacy to take action for improving the most important resource in education, teachers who are fully credentialed for the subject and students they are assigned to teach and who reflect the students they serve. This will require connecting all pieces of teacher data we have so we can assess teacher quality in our schools in real time, not just once a year. Looking at the health and challenges of our teacher workforce requires connecting pipeline and workforce issues, pieces, teacher candidates in higher ed, who's going to work where, who's left the workforce, who's coming back, which specific schools and communities experience the highest teacher vacancy and turnover. Californians need to know this in real time for continuously improving what it is we're working together to access high quality education. I just want to salute your commitment today and offer Public Advocates collaboration in this work and to thank you for your service.
Thank you so much. And as of right now, we don't have any other requests for public comment in our Q&A. So I'll do another last call for public comment. And we'll just hang out in awkward Zoom silence for a moment to give folks the opportunity. And while we're waiting, I'll open it up to board members if you all have any questions or thoughts that have come up as well regarding anything you've heard during today's presentation. Okay, I think I've waited the required 5 seconds. So I will go ahead and close public comment for now. As I mentioned, if you still would like to submit public comment even after the period, please use the Q&A function, or you can send us an email at the email address listed on the slide. So if you can go to the next slide. And so now, board members, it is your turn. I think Marianne and I, mostly Marianne, are tired of hearing our own voices. We want to hear from you for what are you looking forward to being a board member? So we have 3 questions on the screen. So I'll just go ahead and read them, and we'll put them in the chat as well. And we'll stop sharing our screen too to make sure that we can all see each other. But let's start off with what is your or your organization's top priority for the C2C data system? What concerns should we be aware of? And what opportunities should we be thinking about? So I'd like to open it up if you'd like to answer any of the questions, all of them, one of them, 2 of them, or even not even answer the questions, but you just have a thought or a comment or concern that you'd like to share. I think this is definitely your time to come together as a group and get to know each other and kind of understand everyone's perspectives starting off this work. So I'd like to open it up for volunteers if anyone would like to share. And then if we don't have volunteers, I'm always happy to volunteer folks. But I'd like to encourage you all to share your thoughts.
Well, I'm looking forward to, I'm sorry, Jason had his hand up. Go ahead, Jason.
No, go ahead, Tamika. I'll go after.
I'm looking forward to working with the advisory committee. One of my other roles was director of adult ed, and I think that is another area that does not get a whole lot of attention, but needs to be a part of some of these data sets. As we're pulling students from adult ed into community college who are, new citizens who are sometimes, getting their GED or, really moving, we can move them into the world of work with having more data. The other piece is Calbright has in its enabling legislation a research and development component. And part of that is a comprehensive learner record. So we are seeking opportunities for digital badging, ways in which we can really allow the learner to have access to their work and their transcript and have that be in a digital format. So I'm really excited about the possibilities of linking that with the e-transcripts and things that we could do in that realm as well.
Thank you. And I just want to add that the ability for us in K-12 and to really cross verticals specifically, the ability for sometimes we just focus on our own data sets and not really look at what's above and below, and having the opportunity with C2C to pull data from early childcare and look at that once that child enters kindergarten and not waiting 3 or 4 or 5 months to really know who that child is, both mentally, behaviorally, and academically, and then also understanding the pathway that child and that young adult goes through post-secondary education and careers. One thing we're looking at specifically in Santa Cruz County is a lot of career technical education programs and seeing if those students follow in those careers in the future, and really seeing those paths and accessing that data. So really breaking down the silos of early childhood, K-12, post-secondary, and career development, and looking at the individual and seeing the pathways and how we can continue to improve in the public sector specifically.
Thank you. Marshall, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to 3 things specifically. One, equity for student-centered data that will be useful in examining outcomes for various students, including prospective student groups, I work a lot with federal data, and data can be very limited, and trying to pull resources and merge data together can sometimes be a headache. And so I think, I'm super excited to be on this committee where we can get a more comprehensive picture of student success, and as the public comment, teacher quality, all of these entities that are and stakeholders that are vital towards ensuring that we have a equitable, educated student population that can translate to positive, equitable labor outcomes. I think too, like just overall infrastructure, and ensuring that again, various systems are matching with one another with a respect to student privacy or data privacy as well. And so keeping that at the forefront, and just I think lastly, just ensuring that the data is user friendly. I don't think it's that helpful to have all the systems talk to each other, have great dashboards, but then like the general public can't digest it, or it's not comprehensible. So yeah, looking forward to really those three things and learning from my other fellow board members, and helping and hoping that this system you can truly see a positive return for current and future students in California down the road.
Thank you. I think Vikash, or how can you pronounce your name one more time for me?
Vikash. Think like Oshkosh Vikash, and you'll get it every time.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, so I think I share the opportunity here to follow students, or to think about sort of the more holistic journey of students across segments, across time, across graduation and momentum points is really powerful. I think for me, the disaggregation by race, ethnicity, and also by gender, and other potential areas to look at is a really important piece of what a data system like this needs to allow us to do and allow users to do. And it's something that I think, we can choose to or not choose to put front and center. I think about sort of to the extent that there is a public facing or an outward facing dashboard, are we simply displaying a statewide average, or are we taking the opportunity to display averages for subgroups and really think about, as what we should be highlighting out of the data as we see it, right? Or just sort of what the data itself is showing. So thinking critically about, again, where do we say with statewide averages, where do we show averages by race, ethnicity? How do we make that information as accessible and attainable as possible? I think that to me is a real priority. So.
Thank you. Lisa Chavez.
Hi, I'm really looking forward to leveraging my experience, 20 years as a researcher. I tell the people who on my team that I really played every position. I love baseball. I played every position on the team. I have made requests to state agencies for data, so I'm definitely going to have some ideas and thoughts on how the importance of making such a system transparent, fair, and very customer responsive. I've made use of probably every query building tool there is. Anyone remember the CPAC, or what happened to it? I mean, I thought that was a great query building tool. It's gone, but I have extensive experience with that, and it's really important. I know that that whatever query building that we build is going to be very intuitive, easy to understand, not going to be just like a million data points there. It's, it has to just be really, I believe in like handing people things very, like making the user experience very easy, intuitive. People shouldn't have to work very hard to figure out what questions they can ask with something that's amazing that's in front of them. And then finally, with regards to dashboards, I love dashboards, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the great dashboards that this team's going to build and giving feedback. My priority is, again, making them very clear, easy to use, easy to understand, easy to use, but also aesthetically pleasing. That is something just really important to me. I should have been a designer. I could have been a lot of things, but aesthetically pleasing is incredibly important, not only just for the user, but I think for credibility. I mean, how are we? I'm a native of California. We're the best state in the nation. We should have the best of everything, and this is an example. So I'm looking forward to working on all of those things, and those will be my priorities in our conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, I think your hand is raised again, right?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to echo what Marshall and Vikash said about equity and disaggregation. Those really are my top priorities when it comes to this work for the dashboards and all of the publicly facing data. And then I'm really excited and concerned about the research request form and process. I think worried that that'll be too onerous, but I know we also have to be worried about privacy and other things. So excited to be able to provide input on that as we move forward this year. So.
Can I go? Sorry, I can't put my hand up. So I'm Jake Jackson. I'm gonna agree with what Lisa said. I think that transparency is super important, and I think it's actually one of the things that y'all are doing really well right now. And then I'm going to agree with Alex as well. I'm really interested in kind of in that vein of transparency, how people are going to request data and what those look like, what the denials will look like, and then I know that's part of our job, and that's one I'm excited to dig into as well. Hopefully, when and if that happens.
Thank you, Heather.
Hi, so building on that, I'm very interested in a lot of the process that happens before you get to things being on a dashboard or in tools, because there's a lot of research, a lot of analytics, a lot of decisions that have to take place before we're at a point where we can really communicate things with the public. And so to Jake's point, I think that that's one of the first steps that I'll be really interested in digging into. I also think that you know, there is just a lot of importance right now from a public perspective around not just transparency, but also timelines and early wins. While we've been on the phone, I just saw an article about in EdSource about CVE withholding test score data, right? These things really undercut public trust, not just in education and data, but in government more broadly. And I think that there's what we're all engaged in here is really critical from kind of a democracy perspective as well. And so I have a lot of interests, varied interests in making sure that this is successful.
Thank you. Reagan?
Hi, everyone. So wanted to dive in on the concern side. So more of an opportunity rather than actual critical concern. But so what I'd love to focus on is the use case of each of the parts of the Cradle-to-Career data system. So in the data and tools introduction, the wonderful introduction that Marianne laid out for us. What I'm hearing is that the system is ultimately going to offer a streamlined application process and access to students' own data, which is more of a real-time application, and it requires identity resolution, specific security requirements subject to different laws than the data and research for evaluation type of setup that so just really being mindful of the ultimate use case and then associated technological and security and legal requirements of making that happen. I'm also wanted to highlight that I am really, really excited about children's data and immersed in that world. And wanted to highlight too that many of the data systems that house information about really young kids specifically, which the cradle part of the Cradle-to-Career system, it's not yet linked or even organized at an individual level. And so really trying to think through how to leverage my experience in linking those individual data records, but also for particular use cases in order for us to really fill out our understanding of Cradle-to-Career.
Thank you. This has been awesome. I'm super just excited that you all are so engaged, especially after being on Zoom for 2 hours. So I love this. Any other thoughts from our board members? Oh, Jennifer?
Sure. Yeah, love everything that has been shared. Yeah, double down on the disaggregation and intersection, a tool that does that well. And I have a lot of feelings about dashboard design and use. Still interact with quite so many that I feel like are enabling like deficit narratives and that look engaging in terms of the art and design, but we can't actually, even I can't kind of look at a lot of them and tell you what the business rules are or what it's telling us. So really am hopeful that we can also learn from some of the tools that have been existent and used for a number of years now, like California School Dashboard and a lot of other tools. And so I know CORE has its own whole system of metrics and dashboards to see like what are some of the lessons that we're learning about how people are using that data, and then always going to point back to, you know, if we're encouraging people to look at something and to engage with it, what question is that answering, and how does that actually encourage us to imagine an asset-based narrative that gives students more supports and more opportunities. So I think there are ways that we can not be afraid to really tell a story, and in a provocative way that does make data more useful.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or feedback or questions from our board members? Okay, I'm seeing some heads shaking, so I'm going to take that as a no. Thank you so much for this awesome engagement. I think it's really just inspiring to see how dedicated this board is to implementing this system and to making sure that it works for our communities. So to me, I think this was a great first team building opportunity for us to just become, much more excited about the work that's to come. So if we can bring the slides back to the resources slide, and we will start wrapping up here, and hopefully, not hold you much longer on Zoom. So we'll bring back up the slide. So I will just kind of get us started with our closing. So there are some links on this slide for resources. Of course, our website, c2c.ca.gov, is there for the public, for you to access information about our office. Of course, please check out the planning process website that's hosted by WestEd. They pretty much put everything in the planning process on this website. You can read about the recommendations that the work groups submitted. You can read the legislative reports. You can read the actual legislation that created Cradle-to-Career. It's a really good resource to have. And then, of course, please email me. My email address is on the slide. I am here to help you be successful in your tenure, in your term as a board member. And if you can't remember how to spell my last name, you can always reach us to at info@c2c.ca.gov as well. I monitor that inbox with a couple more of our C2C team members. So that's also another way to reach us. So I will turn it back over to, before I turn it back over, one other quick thing before I forget. The next board meeting is on October 27th. It is virtual. I know that I sent out a hold that blocks out your entire day from 9:30 to 5. The goal is not to hold you to that. Unfortunately, with Bagley-Keene, we can't necessarily publish a exact ending time just due to public comment. So I put the hold on your calendars for the day, just to make sure that we blocked off enough time for you. But as we get closer, I will give more information about the agenda and try to give you just kind of an estimated time that will end. So please don't be alarmed. We're not trying to hold you on Zoom for 8 hours. Trust me, I would not do that to you all. But I just wanted to just make that known that we can't necessarily publish an ending time due to Bagley Keene. So more to come about that the next board meeting. So now I'll turn it over to Marianne to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Sydney. And I really appreciated hearing all of your comments just now about the things that you're excited to see, the things that you want to make sure we do, and that you, some of the concerns and ideas that you raised. So thank you for sharing that. We were taking notes. We'll definitely keep all of that in mind. And one thing I just wanted to flag, I know we did staff introductions at the very beginning, but that was like hours ago and we've all forgotten. So I just wanted to flag a couple things. The executive team that's leading the key areas of our work was a part of this meeting today and heard everything you said. So Dan Lamoury, right, as he's thinking about the data infrastructure itself and linking this data together, that's the role that he's playing as Director of Data Infrastructure. Shannon, and her role as Director of Engagement, can really think about a lot of these points around making sure it's accessible and user-friendly and the kind of visual design of those things. And then Ryan, as Director of Data Programs, is going to be the one who's kind of a bridge between, Shannon and Engagement and Dan and Data Infrastructure, and actually building out these different dashboards. And was, here to hear all of your thoughts and can implement some of what you mentioned. So I just wanted to connect the dots there. Maybe before we close, Ryan, I don't know if you have any reflections on what you heard that you want to share in real time, or otherwise we'll get back to a lot of these ideas in our next meeting in October.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Marianne, for for the chance, and thanks to everybody. Like these conversations are really great from a creative process standpoint. Sometimes I think of them as blind spot coverage, because as I listen and hear ideas, I'm constantly like, oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, and immediately those are little seeds for for future design conversations. And so we'll pour over the notes and process a little bit more, and come up with more conversations for us to have. But I did want to call out 3 things that I heard that that really stuck out to me. First is how might we design these dashboards so that we illustrate the experiences of Californians, young people and families that are overlooked sometimes. So Tamika talked about adult ed, Vikash talked about, and others talked about disaggregating by student, family, and citizen identity groups. Reagan talked about the Cradle part of Cradle-to-Career. So the second is solving the very real problem of putting data together that hasn't been put together yet, / not leaving value on the table when we keep those separate. So Jason talked about that, and so did Marshall. And then the other thing that stuck out to me is focusing on the human experience of using these data dashboards. So the aesthetics, but also presenting meaningful information and stories, which I think we all get here is a very important part of data, but sometimes conventionally is not thought of as a part of it. So how might we design these so that it presents important stories to tell? And Lisa, Reagan, and Jennifer pointed to that. So a lot of times in this process, it takes a little bit, we sit on this stuff for a while and process and think of it, even more ideas come up, but I wanted to highlight those 3 that immediately jumped out at me. So again, thank you for sharing the conversations, and I can't wait to have more of these conversations with y'all. Thanks, Marianne.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. And with that, I think that concludes our very first Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. And we're just so grateful, again, that you're dedicating your time to this important work. And as Sydney mentioned, we're here for you if you have questions between now and our next meeting, and we'll be sending more things your way. So thank you very much, everyone.